Hi, my name is Zach, and this is every film that I watched in March 2026. First film I watched in March was Train Dreams, which I spoke about in a lot more detail than I'm going to here in my last video, films that made me cry. So just in brief, it was a really rare W in my opinion for a Netflix original film. I'm not usually a big fan of Netflix originals, but it was really, really great. Super heartwarming, super heart-wrenching, beautifully acted, beautifully shot. I felt a lot watching this film and it was really great. So yeah, like I said, if you want some more thoughts on it, go and watch my other video, films like that made me cry. I gave Train Dreams a 4.5 out of 5. I randomly decided to watch Star Wars Episode 1 a few weeks ago when I was feeling a bit ill, kind of as like a comfort watch. In my opinion, Phantom Menace is probably the most misunderstood Star Wars movie. I think a lot of people focus on the bad points of the prequel trilogy, and Phantom Menace in particular. Things like Jar Jar Binks, Kid, Anakin Skywalker, the weird sort of, I don't know why they decided to pick a trade dispute as like the main story for the first episode of a new Star Wars trilogy. But for me, when I watched this as a kid, and even now when I watch it as an adult, those things are never what stay with me when I think of Phantom Menace. When I think of Phantom Menace, I think of the pod racing and Duel of Fates and, you know, the origin stories of C-3PO and R2-D2. These are the things that I think of. I think this film is great, and I think it's way better than a lot of people give it credit for. I can't believe that people have the nerve to say that this is the worst of the prequels, or maybe the worst Star Wars film ever, when literally the film that comes after this is Attack of the Clones, which is, in my opinion, one of the ugliest films I've ever seen. I think this is really great, and it's way better than people give it credit for. I gave Phantom Menace a 4 out of 5. I remember watching Monsters University a few years ago and thinking that it was probably in the list of mid to not very good Pixar movies, but on a rewatch, I actually thought it was really great. That might have been because I was eating a homemade lasagna and drinking a bottle of wine at the time, but either way, I really, really enjoyed it, and I gave it a 4 out of 5. Starship Troopers has been on my radar for a long time, and it's been on my watch list for quite a while, and it sort of caps off this Paul Verhoeven action trilogy that I mentioned in my last one of these, where I watched RoboCop and Total Recall, and I was planning to then cap that trilogy off with Starship Trooper. It's got the same satirical, weird comedy that RoboCop and Total Recall have, that Paul Verhoeven, I'm assuming, is just really well known for, and it still manages to keep the really cool practical effects whilst also blending in some actually not horrific late 90s CGI. This was really, really great fun, really funny, really action-packed, and just a great watch. I gave Starship Trooper a 4 out of 5. Next I watched Gridiron Gang, which is a 2006 sports drama movie starring The Rock. I grew up on wrestling and MTV, so needless to say, when I was 10 years old and I watched this film, I was incredibly jealous of all the kids in this because they get to hang out with The Rock and Exhibit. This film is so corny and cliched that it shouldn't be good, but I can't lie, I am a bit of a sucker for sports dramas, and this was a pretty good one. I gave Gridiron Gang a 3 out of 5. So I finally finished watching the Star Wars sequel trilogy after watching The Last Jedi last month in February and really not enjoying it. In my opinion, Rise of Skywalker is a slight improvement on The Last Jedi, just because at least in this one it feels like things are happening. Obviously the Palpatine retcon is a complete disaster and awful, but I do think it's quite interesting that they do it right at the start of the movie, so almost by the end, you've kind of had time to deal with the fact that Palpatine's back, and you kind of accept it. I was kind of laughing to myself though at the thought that somebody could go and watch Rise of Skywalker in the cinema when it came out, but they've arrived 5 minutes late and they've just missed like the most important part of the movie right at the beginning. Not great by any means, barely even good, but certainly better than The Last Jedi in my opinion. I gave Rise of Skywalker a 2.5 out of 5. Continuing my Schwarzenegger saga, I watched Running Man. Pretty forgettable if I'm honest. Interestingly enough, Arnold seems to get a lot of praise for his performance in this role, but I actually thought it looked like he really phoned it in. I definitely find the idea of this film a lot more interesting than the film itself. I do know that this recently had a remake, so maybe I'll give that a go in the future. I gave Running Man a 3 out of 5. Sometimes Sometimes if I'm really in the mood to watch a film, but it's quite late or I have plans later on, I'll go to my Letterboxd watch list and I'll sort it by runtime so that I can watch something that's relatively short. And that's why I ended up watching The Guilty. This film's similar in many ways to Locke, which I mentioned in my last one of these for the month of February. This film takes place in almost entirely through phone calls and a very, very small set. Unfortunately, it suffers from another Locke similarity in that I find the main character just completely insufferable. It does, however, have a twist that's probably quite obvious now looking back on it, but it completely caught me off guard. Annoyingly, this is a remake from a Norwegian film that is apparently much better and has been on my watch list for a while, but I just completely forgot about it when I started watching this. I gave The Guilty a 3 out of 5. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man was such a pleasant rewatch. I haven't watched it for many years, but it still holds up so well. The first film is such a great comic book origin story. Willem Dafoe takes his role very seriously in this film, and he is amazing. It's super campy. The upside down kiss scene is obviously super iconic and had a profound effect on me as a young boy. It's just really great and encouraged me and my partner to watch the rest of the trilogy through the month of March. I gave Spider-Man a 4 out of 5. Next, I watched the 2014 Godzilla movie. I'm not sure what compelled me to put this on. It was just a rainy, windy Sunday, and I wanted to watch a cool, big monster movie. And this definitely didn't disappoint. Pure popcorn fodder. I had a great time. I gave Godzilla a 3.5 out of 5. So after deciding we had to watch the rest of the Spider-Man trilogy, I actually think I prefer Spider-Man 2 to the first one. It probably isn't as good of a movie as the first one, but I just have so much more nostalgia for this. I feel like you see a lot more of New York as a city in this one than you did in the first one, which for me as a kid was very cool. I also loved playing the Spider-Man 2 PlayStation 2 game. Free roaming, like web slinging around the city was just the best thing ever. I just have really good memories from this film, and in my opinion, it just edges the first one. But I gave this one, like the first one, a 4 out of 5. After watching and enjoying Godzilla, I thought I'd go through more of this monsterverse that's been created, and so I decided to watch Kong Skull Island. I remember watching Peter Jackson's King Kong when it came out in the cinema with my brother, and we actually had to leave early because we weren't expecting it to be so long. It was pretty unfortunate, but I do remember watching it on DVD when it came out, and I really, really loved that version. This version isn't as good as that one, but what it does share with the Peter Jackson version of King Kong as well as the Godzilla movie is some absolutely stunning visual effects and some super cool looking shots. I gave Kong Skull Island a 3 out of 5. I think it's pretty clear that Spider-Man 3 is the worst of the Sam Raimi trilogy. You spend the first two movies feeling really sorry for Peter as he's just constantly being bullied and judged by people, and then in this version he just becomes so unlikable, even before he becomes emo with the black Venom suit, which is just awful. I do really like the Sandman as a villain. I don't know why, but his story really appealed to me when I was a kid, and I really don't think that Topher Grace's voice matches what I would assume Venom sounds like, but it still caps off a really fun trilogy, and I gave this one a 3 out of 5. The next film I watched was my only cinema trip of the month of March, but I'm fairly sure it was my favourite cinema trip that I've ever been on, and that was to see Project Hail Mary. The film's obviously pretty new, so I won't say too much about the plot. I went into this really only having seen the trailer and having, I think, heard of it before as a very popular novel, but I thought it looked really interesting, and I managed to convince my partner, as well as my friends that I played Dungeons & Dragons with, to indulge me and come to the cinema to watch it with me, and what an amazing idea that was, I must say so myself. I laughed more than I do at most comedies. I cried, I was in awe of the visuals. There was one scene in particular where I have never seen an entire cinema room that was basically full completely silent. As soon as the credits rolled, we looked down the row at each other and every single one of us had the same joyful expressions on our face. For me, this film is what going to the cinema is all about, just pure joy. I gave Project Hail Mary a 5 out of 5. The day after we watched Project Hail Mary, my partner had a real itch for more sci-fi, and she asked me if I'd ever seen the 2009 Star Trek reboot, which I hadn't. The first thing I noticed is, I'm not sure if this film is the origin of the J.J. Abrams lens flare meme, but he is going absolutely mental with it in this film. I'm not sure if I was still just cooling off from watching Project Hail Mary the previous night, but I wasn't really enjoying this. I wasn't very gripped by it. I have very little Star Trek experience, but I actually had to ask my partner halfway through if Kirk was meant to be so annoying and unlikable, because for me, he crossed the line from like arrogant hero that's lovable to actually just a bad character that's ruining the movie. I wanted to like it, but I just thought it was okay. I gave Star Trek a 3 out of 5. If I saw this on a Letterboxd review or if it was maybe a comment on the trailer, but it was a comment from somebody saying that they grew up in Ireland. They were only aware of their intercom system in their school ever being used once to announce news, once in 2001 to inform everybody that the Twin Towers had been hit in America, and the second, that Roy Keane had been sent home from the World Cup squad. That should tell you how big of a news story this was in Ireland. And even across the UK, I remember seeing the clips on the news of Roy Keane like being followed by journalists whilst he was out walking his dog. I'd bet my life that this is not a faithful representation of what happened. The truth probably sits somewhere between what Roy Keane says and what Mick McCarthy says. But this was really great drama, and the clips and like montages of the late 90s and early 2000s football set to Oasis and Fontaines DC were just class. I gave Saipan a 3.5 out of 5. I saw the recent trailer for Spider-Man Brand New Day, and it really made me get the itch, especially after watching the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, to watch the MCU Spider-Man movies. I'm not really a big fan of the wider MCU. I watched Iron Man when that came out. I went to the cinema to see that with friends, and I thought that was pretty good. I thought the first Avengers movie was really fun, but I couldn't even get through Age of Ultron because I just thought it was so boring. Homecoming definitely feels like an MCU movie, so if that's your thing, you probably really loved it. I didn't. Spider-Man using state-of-the-art technology just felt really weird. The villain in this movie seemed really dry and boring, especially when you compare it to the previous trilogies with like the Green Goblin and Dr. Octavius. It did look great though, and I do think that Tom Holland is a great casting for Spider-Man. I didn't love it, but I think I did enjoy it enough to watch the second one, so when I get round to watching that, I'll let you know what I thought of it. But in the meantime, I gave Homecoming a 3 out of 5. When I saw the trailer for Send Help in the cinema, I immediately thought that it was just going to be a tropical island remake, basically, of Misery. There are moments of that, but Send Help gets a lot weirder than I was expecting. It's basically a horror comedy movie with moments of really over-the-top gore and really crazy facial expressions. Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien put in some surprisingly stellar performances. It was just a lot of fun and a great way to end off the month. I gave Send Help a 3.5 out of 5.